Hello, hello, testing, hello, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Member mic check, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Plus we got another.
call the hearing to order and just discussing the awkwardness, whether we shake hands, fist bump, but obviously it's on the minds of many, and certainly for you and the men and women you command, it's obviously a very big issue. And together, we'll get through these as we have many others. Today, the subcommittee will review the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps' tactical and rotary wing aviation programs in fiscal 21 budget requests. We have an extensive portfolio of aviation programs covered today. As a reminder that the subcommittee is holding a separate hearing for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. Reminder, so the F-35, if you have to, we can do it here today, but we're having a separate hearing, certainly, which is going to demand a lot of our time. I'd like to welcome our distinguished panel of witnesses, all 8 of you. Dr. Bruce Jetty, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisitions, Logistics, and Technology. Brigadier General Walter Rugen, Director of Future Vertical Lift Cross-Functional Team. Mr. James Gertz, Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. You're going, is this 7 out of 8 times? Wonderful, good to see you again. Lieutenant General Stephen Rudder, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Aviation. Rear Admiral Gregory Harris, Director of Air Warfare and Chief of Naval Operations. Dr. Will Roper, Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. General Mike Holmes, Commander, Air Combat Command for the Air Force, and Lieutenant General David Nahum, Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans and Programs at Headquarters, Air Force at the Pentagon. Thank you all for your service and especially being here today. I will be submitting my full statement for the record, but want to take a few minutes, just some areas that we are going to have particular focus today. Fiscal 21 budget request underlines tough choices ahead of us and highlights, even within the context of the largest defense budget in history, resources that need to be allocated wisely. The request before us trades current aviation capability and capacity for future capability, calculating the need to invest in our high-end next-gen systems that will come at the expense of the existing aircraft, certainly flying those current steady state and lesser contingency missions. The Navy's budget proposal removes 36 Super Hornet strike fighter aircraft planned after the 21 budget and begins to shut down the FA-18 production line beginning in 23, increasing the Navy's strike fighter shortfall next year. Further, we need to understand what gives Navy leadership and acquisition official confidence in terminating Super Hornets production 10 years before the next-gen FA-XX strike fighter, and currently existence in briefing sides is this prudent. Turning to the Army, future vertical lift initiatives will approach $1 billion in year 21, with most of the funding accelerating development of the 2 new aircrafts. Army witnesses should be prepared to explain what measures they are taking to manage cost and risk as the aircraft developed in parallel. With respect to ongoing Army programs, in the fiscal year 20, the NDAA and the appropriations both include $28 million in advanced procurement for the Chinook Block 2 long lead items. Now we've learned that despite congressional direction, the Army has put these funds on hold, pending a decision from Army leadership. I'm interested to hear details on the Army strategy, how to preserve the heavy lift industrial base. Management of the Ch53 Kay, the heavy lift, certainly is one of great interest, and we're glad to see some of the openness and the feedback that we're getting, so we'll get into that. And as the subcommittee continues to work on the 21 NDAA, we'll take a close look at these issues to make sure taxpayer dollars are wisely spent. Now I want to turn over to my friend and ranking member of the TAL committee, Ms. Hartzler, for her opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a lot to cover in a relatively short amount of time, so I'll try to keep my comments brief. But first of all, thank you. Thank you all for your service to our nation. We really appreciate your leadership. And being here to provide a testimony on the budget request for tactical and rotary wing aircraft modernization programs. With flat budgets likely to be the norm, I appreciate all of your efforts in conducting exhaustive program reviews to better align your military service with the national defense strategy and the great power competition. And I look forward to working together to determine what is the right balance to fund both current tactical readiness and needed modernization required for future readiness. It is within this context that I'll highlight a few issues to discuss during this hearing. Regarding Navy strike fighter management, the chairman alluded to this. This is something I'm very interested in as well. This budget request, as he said, as you know, removed 36 new production FA-18 Super Hornets in the out years that were originally planned for production in last year's budget. Given the Navy's current shortfall of 49 aircraft, I'm concerned that this decision is creating too much operational risk in the near term. Regarding the F-15EX program and Air Force fighter force structure, last year during a similar hearing, we heard from you, Dr. Roper and General Holmes, that 2/3 of the F-15C fleet were past their service life and these planes needed to be replaced now, which is why the Air Force made the F-15EX a top priority. I shared those concerns and agreed with you. And I'm concerned that this budget request appears to have removed 6 F-15EX aircraft from what was originally projected in the fiscal year 2020 budget for fiscal year 2021. I understand these planes were removed due to higher Air Force priorities. I'd like to know what these higher priorities are, since we obviously have a major readiness challenge with our F-15C fleet. I'd appreciate the witnesses to update us on the current status of the F-15EX program. Regarding Army rotorcraft modernization, both the future armed reconnaissance aircraft and the future long-range assault aircraft appear to be making considerable progress, and significant down selects are scheduled for this month. That's good news, and I'm encouraged by their success to date. I'd appreciate an update on both of these programs from our witnesses today. I do, however, have some concerns regarding the reduced request for UH-60 Mike Blackhawks, and specifically, what impacts this could have on accelerating the fielding of these helicopters for the Army National Guard. In closing, during our hearing last week on ground system modernization programs, General Murray stated that, quote, "No service is able to go it alone. And as history has shown, joint teams win, and modernization is no exception. I'd say winning matters, but winning together matters most," end quote. I couldn't agree more. So I'd appreciate it if the witnesses could describe how they're coordinating with one another, and look forward to working with all of you and my colleagues in a collaborative manner as we review the fiscal year 2021 budget request. So thank you, Chairman, for organizing this important hearing. I yield back.
Thank you. And I would ask that each of you keep your opening remarks to 5 minutes per service. We have a full discussion, and we have many of you. So with that, Dr. Jetty, great to have you back. Look forward to your statement.
Chairman Norcross, Ranking Member Hartzler, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, thank you for the invitation to discuss the Army's Tactical Rotary Aircraft Acquisition and Modernization Programs for fiscal year 2021, and for this opportunity to appear with our service counterparts. With me today is Brigadier General Wally Rugen, Director of the Future Vertical Lift Cross-Functional Team. I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, you're making our written statement a part of the record for today's hearing. Aviation is one of the Army's largest portfolio in terms of budget, and an important element of the joint, interorganizational, and multinational team. Our focus on aviation modernization comprises 2 parallel lanes of execution: modernization through new platforms and targeted modernization efforts for the current platforms. My office and my Program Executive Office, Aviation, work closely with the Army Futures Command and Brigadier General Rugen's Future Vertical Lift cross-functional team to rapidly develop capabilities to support multi-domain operations. Key efforts include the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft, FARA, which is designed to fill a critical armed reconnaissance capability that currently exists in our formation, and the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft, FLRAA, which is projected to replace the UH-60 Black Hawk with increased speed, range, payload, and endurance. At the same time, the FY21 President's budget request also invests in the readiness and modernization of our current Black Hawk, Apache, and Chinook fleets needed for the foreseeable future. I'd like to take a moment to address our reform efforts. The Army continues to implement initiatives granted by Congress in order to streamline and gain efficiencies in our acquisition process. Specifically, aviation has been playing a key role in implementing the Army's intellectual property policy, which stresses identifying and planning IP needs early in the life cycles of any system. And PEO Aviation is participating in Program Management Resource Tool, PMART, pilot program, which captures and manages our program data across the enterprise to enable real-time analysis and data-driven decisions. This will further ensure Army senior leaders have the information necessary to make well-informed decisions on Army programs. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the subcommittee, we are grateful for your strong and steadfast support for our soldiers and our soldier aviators, as well as our Army civilians and their families. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee, Mr. Chairman. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz.
Chairman Norcross, Ranking Member Hartzler, and distinguished subcommittee members. Thanks for the opportunity to appear before you today to address the Department of the Navy's fiscal 21 budget request. Joining me today from the Department of the Navy are Lieutenant General Steve Rudder, Deputy Commandant for Aviation, and Rear Admiral Greg Harris, Director of Air Warfare. With your permission, I intend to provide a few brief remarks and submit our statement for the record. We thank the subcommittee and all of Congress for your leadership and steadfast support. Your efforts to fully fund the fiscal 2020 budget provides the stability and predictability in funding that enable us to build and sustain the naval aviation force that the nation needs, so we can execute the maritime component of the National Defense Strategy. In 2019, the Department delivered 125 new manned aircraft and 15 unmanned air systems to the Navy and Marine Corps, with a plan of delivering an additional 125 aircraft this fiscal year. As we continue to modernize the fleet, we've also focused on aviation maintenance, delivering higher aircraft mission capable rates, reducing maintenance backlogs, and enabling our maintainers to do a better job of supporting our fleet. The Department achieved our goal of an 80% mission capable rate for the F-18 EFs and EA 18Gs in October 2019, and periodically throughout 2019 for the Marine tactical aircraft. We're committed to maintaining and expanding these systematic improvements. Our 21 investments build upon these initiatives in order to deliver a ready, capable, and global sea-based and expeditionary force. Our vision is to provide the right capability in the hands of the warfighter on schedule and in the most affordable manner possible. The FY21 budget procures 121 aircraft with 537 aircraft across the FIDEP, increases depot maintenance and logistics funding, increases our flying hour program, and continues to make investments in many key Navy and Marine Corps development programs to ensure readiness for the future fight. Additionally, our 21 budget makes focused investments in our fleet readiness centers, enabling the procurement of more modern equipment and implementation of process and workflow improvements, similar to what the Navy is doing in the public shipyards. Minimizing the risk of physiological episodes continue to be the naval aviation's top safety priority, and will remain so until we understand and mitigate all causal factors. We've reduced PE for legacy Hornets by over 80% and seen similar improvements in the T-45 aircraft. In January, we had 0 F/A-18 PE incidents. The first month was 0 since the summer of 2011. The Department will continue to work to drive PEs to the lowest possible level. Naval aviation operates forward near our potential adversaries' home shores. We thank you for the strong support this subcommittee has always provided our sailors and Marines and their families, and we thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. We look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Roper.
Chairman Norquist, Ranking Member Hartzler, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to testify on this important topic. Aviation is the key to winning on the battlefield. Air superiority has been the hallmark of our military, and we're committed in the Department of the Air Force to keep it that way. I'm delighted to be here with our distinguished colleagues from the services and to share this hearing with General Holmes and General Nahom, who are great wingmen in trying to modernize our future Air Force. The National Defense Strategy makes it very clear that time matters. We have a capable adversaries, China and Russia, who can match us technologically and, in the case of China, economically. So the need to modernize the force while we have a window of opportunity and divest legacy assets that are draining our resources that could go into advanced warfighting capabilities could not be a more important nor timely topic. We know that we have to provide 2,100 fighters to meet the needs of our combatant commanders, along with all the support equipment, training, and other systems such as combat rescue that enable those fighters to be a fighting force at the future edge of the battlefield. We're focused on doing that in the Air Force. We're focused on training pilots better using technologies like AI, artificial intelligence, tailored training, so that pilots get through the training pipeline faster and are able to take on combat duties. But we're focused on far more than just what we buy and how we modernize. We care about the speed at which we do it. We're very thankful for authorities that you have granted and championed, things like Section 804 that allow us to get on contract faster with industry, do more prototyping, which is just flying before you buy, so that we can remove time from our programs and deliver faster for the warfighter. To date, we've removed approximately 125 years from traditional programs, and we look forward to continuing to drive speed of delivery. Modern practices in software development are also helping us bring greater lethality to the edge. Practices like DevSecOps or agile software development are fundamentally changing how fast we can modernize systems and keep them relevant. Even though we may talk about the airplane, the software on it is an increasingly important part of its lethality. We have to modernize at the speed of need. We're excited about new technologies like digital engineering that will change the way in which we build and design systems and modernize future systems that we don't have today. We look forward to sharing those with you both in this open hearing and in a closed setting. We thank you for the focus that you put on supporting the Department of the Air Force, our airmen and their families. We thank you for your time today for this hearing. Our time matters when we have a capable adversary. In the Department of the Air Force, we try to make every year, every budget count, and we look forward to sharing you the highlights of this budget today.
Thank you for your statements. So, Dr. Roper, let me just start with a couple of comments because it's indicative across all the services. Window of opportunity. Why is now that window, and it wasn't 2 years ago or 2 years from now? And the second question, in your statement or in your testimony, you talk about being embraced by the Secretary of Defense goal of irreversible moment. Why is it irreversible at this moment and hasn't happened before? Because obviously we make changes. And why is now that window of opportunity?
Chairman Norquist, if we had our druthers, I think we should have started this pivot a couple of years ago. And I think many of you I've worked with in past jobs focusing on peer competition, high-end warfighting. It's a significant challenge today. If you go back to the Cold War, we were generating most of the technology that found its way to the battlefield. We were the major generator of technology in the world, and now we live in a world where the Defense Department is only 20% of the R&D that happens in this country. We live in a world that is technology rich. And so that should give us both concern, but also, a lot of appeal, because we live in a time where we can pull things into future warfighting systems. China's been modernizing, looking at how our military operates in the Middle East. It's been on display. Our playbook's been understood. The counters have been done. And if we continue to build the same kinds of systems and fight the same kind of way, we're playing into their hands, playing into a fight that they understand and know how to counter. So the reason that now is the time is that if we simply wait until the fight happens, we won't have the time to build new systems, new training, new techniques, so that we retain the overmatch that we've enjoyed.
So are you suggesting the risk is less now, is why
The
that
risk
window
of
is open?
The risk will always be less now than waiting, right? We have to start now to create options for the future. Secretary Esper's comment of making the National Defense Strategy irreversible, I think, is simply moving the portfolios of the services to focus on high-end warfighting. The capabilities that we can build to take on a peer, the training that is needed to take on a peer, can be taken into the uncontested environment, into low-intensity conflict, but you can't take low-intensity conflict into the peer fight. And so this pivot towards irreversibility is getting our portfolios properly modernized so that the nation calls upon us to project power in a contested environment. We will have options for the commanders to do that.
Thank you. So, Admiral Harris, let me shift things over to the Navy here. In my opening remarks, we talked about the 44 strike fighters change per air wing. Does not include attrition of the aircraft. Obviously, every time something goes into the maintenance depot, we find things out that help educate us, whether it's corrosion or otherwise. So, can you explain to the committee why the Navy does not plan for attrition of the reserved aircraft and the carrier wings, and what risk is involved in that?
So there is risk, thank you for that question, in the attrition aircraft, but it's a balanced mix for the Navy as we looked across the number of combat-coded aircraft that we need to be able to meet that high-end fight for those 9 carrier air wings. That balance comes in the result of ensuring that you have enough in depot maintenance that are coming out ready to be forward deployed with the forces while we bring the others back into the service life modification program. So it's a balanced risk that we are taking right now based on the current budgets.
So I know my ranking member is going to have a lot of questions on the F-18, but I want to talk about what has happened recently with the first 2 Super Hornets coming into service life maintenance. Found a tremendous amount of corrosion. I can't say areas that wasn't unexpected because the maintenance schedule suggests that we should do things to protect those. And here we are blowing the budget out, the time out. A, what are we doing to prevent further problems? And are those first 2 aircraft the most difficult ones, or are we going to fall into this? And what are we doing to change it so we don't face this sort of thing?
Yes, sir. I think it's a combination of factors. One of the factors is we are finding more corrosion on the airplanes, and I'll ask Admiral Harris to talk about what are we doing on the operational fleet to get after that so that we can not get the corrosion, then have to pull it out to the extent we are. The other thing we changed a little bit in the SLM program is we've added a bit to it so we deliver a fully mission-capable airplane out of SLM. In other words, we bring in all the phase maintenance checks, so when we hand it back to the wing and the squadron, it's ready to go. Previous service life extension programs have just, done things to the airplane, but not taken advantage of the fact we had the airplane all pulled apart. The third piece is working closely with Boeing to productionize this service life extension. In other words, not get every airplane being its own custom artisan activity. We need to get that into production flow. So some of the risks of shutting the F-18 line down after 21 will be taking advantage of that line to productionize to get to our goal of 40 airplanes a year through that SLEP line.
So let me ask you, while you're on that, the first 2 picked out and we found the corrosion much worse. Are we anticipating that to continue, or are you expecting that to drop? And what have you done to rectify the budget and the time schedule?
Yes, sir, twofold. We are working on maintenance on the flight line and our procedures on the flight line using best practice out of commercial aviation to reduce exposure to corrosion. Only open it up once, button it up as opposed to open it up many times. And then I expect over time, as that gets into the fleet, that component of uncertainty will drop down.
Admiral Harris, did you have anything to add? So maybe you can explain, as we understand it, from the manufacturer, there were certain processes that were supposed to take place. And what they suggested, the way of fixing it, were the ones that were suggested and weren't followed. So not so much why wasn't it followed, but have we corrected those actions, and why haven't they followed the manufacturer's suggestions?
So I think what we'll find, Chairman, is that as we perform maintenance on the aircraft, frequently we're adding inspections as we see things that we think we need to do. So it's oil changing your car more frequently than the manufacturer recommends. So you are opening panels more frequently. As we can align all of those inspection cycles and prevent that, the idea will be to open it less frequently, more along the lines of what we should be doing. And then the other piece gets down to using the precise material when you're putting corrosion prevention on the surfaces prior to putting them back together.
So-
We need to get back to the correct material.
We don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but closing it up the proper way, it's not the opening, it's the resealing that is the problem historically. So,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Dr. Jetty, or Chinook, we put in there last year the idea of the advanced procurement. As we understand it, that's still in the same position as we put it a year ago. That's the first question. The second one is minimum sustaining rates, whether it's 24, 18. The answer a year ago was we needed a robust program, that more speed for the future, more weight. When we look at the program, the way that we're hearing you say it, that foreign military sales is going to bring up that minimum sustaining rate. Right now, I think there's only one that has been signed and one potentially. First, give us an update on foreign military sales that can feed the beast, shall we say, of keeping that line running. And then I have a follow-up.
Yes, sir. So I'll start with the foreign military sales. On the foreign military sales, we are able to maintain the minimum sustaining rate. So we've worked with Boeing on the minimum sustaining rate, and the one defined that we both agreed to.
Is
through
how many?
the PO.
How many?
18.
Okay.
And 18 is one shift a day, 8-hour day, 5 days a week.
Yep.
Throughout the year. The minimum sustaining rate is 18. We have orders in place for out to 25. We believe we're at those minimum sustaining rates.
Really?
We have moved some of our ORF deliveries just to the right, which lets us make sure that we fill in some of the gaps. We have a LOA waiting signature with the UK. We're pretty confident that that'll follow through. They're going through their current budget works as well. We expect that by October. That's very promising. We also have visibility on direct commercial sales. So that sometimes what happens is we make our counts based purely on the number that are being produced for foreign military sales, which are separate from direct commercial sales.
Right.
Some countries do direct commercial sales. Some countries want to go through the foreign military sales and leverage some of the training and things that you can get, sustainment that you get through the FMS. So the Netherlands has on contract through direct commercial sales six new builds for Block 1s, delivery in 21. We have Singapore is on contract for direct commercial sales for 8 new builds as well. And we've laid these out with respect to the profiles.
So in the interest of time, we'll get the actual numbers, but they're going to meet the minimum sustaining rate.
Yes, sir, out to 25 is where we think we're
Okay.
good.
And second round, we'll get back to Mrs. Hartzler.
Thank you. Just to pick up on the F-18 questions that my colleague started with there. So first of all, would you affirm that we have a 49 airplane shortfall right now?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, and that's one carrier wing. And you'd confirm that we're having 30, you're suggesting this budget to cut another 36 Super Hornets out that were projected to be built, but now you don't want them.
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. I know you said that it was a balanced risk. I feel like this is too much operational risk, and I want to get some clarity on, as you talk about the service life extension and maintenance. So how are you addressing this shortfall? It sounds like you're just going to maintain and rehabilitate the current ones as your plan.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. And again, the transition risk between fleets is always where we're at most
Sure.
risk. And so our 21 budget fully funds the F-18 production at 24.
Right.
That gives us
Future life,
that gives us some time. We again made some hard decisions on F-18. As the SLM line comes up towards our goal of being able to take 40 airplanes into that line a year, we can understand the balance of that risk. And as we brought the mission-capable rate of aircraft up across the Department of Navy, that gives us additional up aircraft to help balance that shortfall. So it was an affordability balance. We're trying to work the balancing act, again, fully funding the 21, that 3-year multi-year, so that we can continue to watch that this year and ensure the decisions we made in 21 reflected in 22 out budget balance that risk appropriately.
So you're cutting in the out years 36 aircraft, and you're going to pull in 40 that are currently flying into maintenance. How long does it take to go through the service life extension?
Right now, we're at about 18 months. When we get at full rate, our goal is to do that in 12 months.
So if you add all those up, this is a severe shortage that we are experiencing, and then if you don't account for the attrition rate actually in combat, we would have a very large gap there potentially.
Yes, ma'am. We are taking this risk until the end, kind of late 2020s. I think 29 is when we will get to the full fighter inventory. And
Okay.
so we've had to take some risk as we balance that.
Sure. General Rudder, as you heard that the Navy has this shortfall, 49 aircraft, but doesn't account for attrition potentially. Does the Marine Corps have a similar shortfall in strike fighter fleet? And if so, can you describe the shortfall and how it's being mitigated by the Marine Corps?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Since the Navy divested of their legacy Hornets, we actually have a lot of Hornets that we're kind of sorting through to configure with the best of breed, the higher lot numbers, if you will. So, for Hornets, we have, 275. We need about 143 on the flight line. So we have enough Hornets. We have enough Harriers, even though they're down around 123. What the challenge for us is the transition. Quite honestly, we have 18 squadrons. Amid the ongoing deployments that we have, we got squadrons coming and going from Asia right now, coming back from the Middle East, and F-35s and AV-8Bs in the ship as we speak. The challenge will be to maintain a 20 F-35 by a year at least, so we can stand up at least 2 squadrons a year as we go forward. So as we stand down a squadron, there is going to be a dip. Out of our 18 squadrons, we'll have 16 available, if you will. But this transition will be probably the most challenging for us. Not that we'll have less jets, it's just transitioning out of our old jets into the new ones to make sure that the procurement cycle stays at 20 a year.
And there'll be training that needs to go along with that too, since you're switching aircraft and all of that. So it's not just an easy transition.
It's not. That's why, every given year you have 2 squadrons in a transition. It's training the maintainers, training the pilots
Right.
to be ready to deploy, because much like anything else, as the ship mods come to being with our amphibious shipping capability, we're putting F-35s out there. And so, to include the Queen Elizabeth. So we're training people on multi-fronts to not only deploy on the carrier with the Navy, but also deploy in our amphibs and other commitments around the world. So it's an ongoing in-stride transition for the F-35.
Great. Thank you very much. I have some others, but we'll come back second round. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Gabriel.
Thank you, Chairman. General Holmes, on February 27th, we received word that the Air Force was changing its retirement plan for 44 A10 Warthogs. Unfortunately, that change plan didn't reach Chief of Staff of the Air Force in time for him to add this to his testimony on March 4th. Can you comment on what the new plan is now?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. Between General Nahom and I, he'll work the numbers, and I'll kind of talk about the impact, if that's okay.
So as we brought our budget forward, we are trying to balance the need to go forward with fifth-gen aircraft, keep a fourth-gen balance, and conduct all the roles that the nation expects us to do all around the world. And as we balance that force and we look at rebuilding it, we wanted to come through and maintain 7 squadrons of A-10s, which is enough for us to have 1 overseas in PACAF that's stationed there, and then have 6 that can be rotationally available. We keep about 1 squadron of A-10s deployed in the CENTCOM area of operations to meet the requirements there. And with those numbers, we can still meet those requirements. We can do the wing upgrades that are required to keep the A-10 useful, and we can bring all of the A-10 fleet up to the same configuration so that they're all just as capable, and General Nahum will talk about the numbers.
Congressman, so for the A-10, as we work ourselves through the F-35 A-10 comparison test, and we know the restrictions on retiring them, and we're watching.
But just to interrupt you there, General, that actually, I want to bring that up. So we have the requirements. The report is supposed to come out when?
We're expecting the report in the early fall, sir.
Okay. So if the Air Force has decided to retire A-10s over our own objections here, and irrespective of all, what's the point of the report? If you guys kind of made decisions before the report came out and came back to us.
Sir, that's our plan. We fully intend to comply with the law about when we can retire the A-10s. But right now, we're planning for the next phase for the A-10, because when we get past the comparison testing, when we start using F-35 for many of the high-end missions that we're planning on.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it seems prejudicial that you guys already made decisions, already planning the future of the A-10 without showing us the report, so we can have our input, about the comparison between the F-35 and the A-10. Do you see how that would look on our behalf, for how we see things?
Yes, sir. And we're working very closely with DOT&E on the report, not only that, but the IOT&E for the F-35, because it's very important before we go forward with the next phase of the A-10. But what we need from the A-10 moving forward is we still need that airplane in service. We just have to make sure that the A-10s we keep, we upgrade not only with new wings, with a new digital backbone and the avionics to make sure this can be an aircraft that we can use very effectively in low-end conflict for the next 20 years. And we think that's actually a pretty good news story for the A-10, and we intend to make sure we get those numbers right.
And back to you, General Holmes, I guess the bigger question is, we could argue back and forth whether we're doing this report correctly in the right manner, but how did this plan basically evolve to the point where, in my opinion, it seems to be predetermined without any input from Congress? Specifically, if you look at the history of the A-10 in Congress, it has had consistent bipartisan support. So for many of us here, it was quite surprising that suddenly the Air Force showed up with this plan. That's the first time we'd heard about it. There wasn't any other type of input, especially from the authorizers on this side.
Sir, I'm going to again defer that question to the headquarters Air Force. I think our goal in Air Combat Command, as General Nahum said, was to make sure that all the A-10s we kept for another 20 years were useful and could continue to do what they do on the battlefield well. As far as the decisions at the headquarters Air Force, I'll defer that to General Nahum.
And sir, as we look at the A-10 numbers, as we look at all our fleets, we're very keen on making sure we balance the risk across all our portfolios. We want to make sure we have enough of the modernized fighters, the F-35s, for the high-end fight, as Dr. Roper alluded to in his opening comments. Right. And so we want having that balance.
I understand that, but most of our fights still right now are not high-end fights. Most of we find ourselves more doing close air combat support than more than anything else. And thank you for your time, gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, just want to note, as I said to Jennifer Goldfein last week, for me, the fact that I think the process was just tossed aside from the 2017 NDA, it's just, for me, it's quite galling. And I really hope that this committee will work with me to ensure that we don't allow Congress's voice to be not heard again. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Comments are noted. Thank you. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask the panel about the future long-range assault aircraft. Last year, you requested and Congress appropriated funds to accelerate the program based on significant testing progress. Secretary Jett and General Rugen, could you give us a picture of where testing currently stands for the program?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. I think what we saw with the request that was made and supported by Congress last year really set the conditions for a 4-year acceleration from where we are currently in tech demonstration to a program of record and a full weapon system. So what happened last year was a great year of successes as we made it through our analysis, as we made it through Cape sufficiency, and we saw both tech demonstrators fly. We wanted to double down on that success, and we needed that help to, basically in this budget, you see a 4-year acceleration.
Mr. Secretary?
Sorry. What we're doing, sir, is we're taking, we've looked at the successes of the FLRAA. We're looking at the flight capability of both aircraft at this point, and we've begun putting together the final formal plan to move to a flight full program of record. The conceptual design and requirements for a full acquisition strategy will be completed by next year. We'll then determine contract award in FY22 and with FUE in 30. It looks so far, since we've seen such promising, and you can go down and watch the aircraft fly, both of the versions right now.
So it sounds like both of you can reassure this committee that the program will meet the accelerated timeline.
At this point, we believe so, yes, sir.
Are there any particular performance metrics that you consider to be indicative of future success in the program?
I think we had an independent tech readiness assessment by OSD last year where they named 9 technologies that were risk areas that we needed to burn down. We fully understand those risk areas. Some of the most prominent are the full authority fly-by-wire flight controls, the drivetrain, the powertrain, and the like. And again, because we got that report early, probably years earlier than we normally would have, we're already in our next phase driving that risk down.
Yes, sir, and I'd like to add, so elements of overmatch that we see on the aircraft is reach. One of them is reach. It's got 3 subcomponents: speed, range, and endurance. Both aircraft have significant improvement over what it's fundamentally replacing, which is OH-58. It does have a lethality component, which was very limited on the OH-58, but it'll be much more flexible in this version. And the survivability of the aircraft because of the integrated ecosystem. In other words, these aircraft are intending specifically to be able to work together and understand the air picture. It'll give them an increased survivability by knowing where air defenses are, where radars are, how to use the NOE, nap of the earth flights, and mask from different systems. So we're bringing all of these things to bear in trying to make all of these, actually, the FLRAA, FARA, and in seeing how much of that we can push into our existing systems.
Let me finish by just asking, do you anticipate anything that might alter the current timeline or provide an opportunity even to accelerate the testing in this budget cycle or future cycles?
Sir, I think that we, being an acquisition person who's actually had to build stuff and put it on the field, I think we're about as aggressive as I'm prepared to go at this point. But I think it's still well within reason that we can get there by 30.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield back.
Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses that are here today. Lieutenant General Rudder, I just wanted to spend a minute just to catch up on the Ch53 Kay heavy lift replacement program last year. I know we went back and forth with some reprogramming issues regarding the exhaust gas reingestion problem, which is one of the most unpleasant sounding terms I think we've ever heard here. But it does seem like that issue has been sort of worked through. And I was just wondering if you could sort of give us an update as far as how that stands right now, and then just have another question after that.
I'll begin, but I have to thank, Secretary Gertz sitting next to me, that they really did a great job of putting the package together. We had 126 deficiencies. One was the gas reingestion. They fixed that. I know there's some concern about where the budget is this year. We put 7 in there because it wasn't fixed yet, and he hadn't signed off on it yet, so we just put 7 in, but we plan on ramping up from there. But the testing's going well. We've got 1,700 hours on the airframe itself. By this fall, we'll have our first operational airplane flying in New River, and by next year, we'll have our first 4 operational airplanes flying in New River, and we've got our first squadron on contract. So right now, it is on track and going very well. I got to thank the acquisition community for putting it on track.
Well, I think you're right. Actually, Mr. Gertz was deeply involved in terms of trying to work that through with the Appropriations Committee, and I'm glad we had a good ending to that. Again, you sort of alluded to the fact that now we're pretty close to going to a higher production rate than low rate. I mean, can you give us kind of a horizon in terms of how you see that moving forward?
Yeah, we put in 7. I mean, you see 11 the following year. We're hoping we can stay at that. We're hoping the budget stays where it is and it's acceptable. But obviously, we'd like to get higher. The higher the numbers, the greater the learning curve from production, and as we saw with the F-35. The greater the cost curve, as we saw with F-35, as you ramp production, cost curve came down. We can already see a cost curve beginning to take a turn with the Ch53 Kay. So I think increased production will bring that cost curve down more efficiently.
Mr. Gertz, did you want to add anything?
No, sir, I would agree with Stick. I mean, a couple good things. We negotiated that production contract, so any of these fixes will go into the production aircraft, so we're not handing the field an aircraft that doesn't have the fixes in, which I think is important. That also means we can accelerate production. And so with the fixes already in, we will accelerate that production ramp to get as most efficient as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Langborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. Thank you all for being here and what you do for our country. General Holmes, could you provide the subcommittee with an update that's appropriate for an open setting like this on where we believe Russia and China are with their 5th generation aircraft production?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'll do my best. We believe that China is in front of Russia in their ability to build an airplane that matches the capabilities that we can. So the J-20 is the airplane that we talk about in China. They've shown they can build it. They haven't shown yet how many they can build and whether they can build it in numbers, but you wouldn't want to bet against China being able to do that. So they have a small number of airplanes that are close to par with our capability to build. The Russian airplane that compares is not as far along on the 5th generation ladder as what China is building. It's a capable airplane, we believe, but they haven't shown the ability to build it in numbers yet. They continue to run into production problems and cost problems, we believe. And so I'm more concerned with China's ability to build a peer aircraft and to produce it in mass numbers than I am with Russia at this time.
Okay, thank you. And then also, General Goldfein testified last week that the Air Force is short about 2,000 pilots. Can you discuss any efforts by the Air Force to accelerate pilot production and experience, and especially in the area of 5th generation pilots?
Yes, sir. Again, thank you. We have several efforts going on. And it starts with trying to make sure that we offer a place where our young air crew and all our operators can find meaning and purpose enough to stay in this career for the long term in the face of, competing economic opportunities somewhere else. So it starts with trying to build an Air Force that they want to stay in for the long term and talking about the importance of what they do. The next place is production. We know that to make up that 2,000 pilot gap, we're going to have to produce more pilots every year. So my colleagues in Air Education and Training Command have been ramping up production every year, both maximizing the use they have of the legacy equipment, the T6, the T38, and the T1, and then looking for new ways to produce pilots better and faster, like Dr. Roper talked about, through Pilot Training Next, now kind of Pilot Training 2.0, and to see if we can produce a better pilot faster using new techniques, and we believe that we can. Right now, most of our pilots are still trained very close to the way we trained them in 1947, and certainly very close to the way we trained them in 1981 when I went to pilot training. Same number of hours, same number of syllabus requirements, doing it the same way, and we believe that we have the ability to speed it up and make better pilots.
Thank you. Thank you for all being here and for the answers to those questions. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the panel for being with us today. Good to see you again, Secretary Gertz. It's been a couple of days. So. General Rudder, I would just want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Commandant's future design for the Marine Force and how that is going to impact your plans for aviation force structure, comp, and total aircraft inventory requirements. You know, just looking ahead a little bit, what can you tell the subcommittee about what to watch for?
Yeah, I don't have an exact number to say as he's actually walking the hallways as we speak, briefing up different leaders in the building. I'll offer that, you know, one of the challenges we have with force design to switch to a major competitor is to pull ourselves out of most of the operations we're doing around the world. I think it's the same for all my partners at the table here. So that'll be the challenge on what we do, because in some cases we have aircraft there in places that we kind of like to use them somewhere else. So being able to focus on the Pacific with what the Commandant wants to do, and his force design will be based a lot in part upon that and how much risk we assume. I would offer that in all the aviation, you've heard him talk about 253 Ks. I mean, he's openly said that in these particular forums. And all the different force design elements, aviation plays a key role. And I guess I'll stop it at that.
That's all I have. The next thing I was going to ask was about how the Ch53 Kay figured into that new force structure. So you got right on it, and thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. And I just want to point out it's a pleasure to see General Holmes, who I've worked with, I guess 7 or 8 years ago on the sale and the integration of the RC-135 to the RAF and the F-35. So it's great to see you back. My first question is to Dr. Roper and General Holmes. A few years back, we cut the Joint Stars, and we moved that money to help fund the future of the ABMS. I see in this budget we're also making major cuts to the Global Hawk, to the Reaper, I think, again, to move funds to the ABMS. We also heard this past week and last week how important to the Army and the Marines the long-range fires are in integrating that, and they rely on the ISR, the Air Force ISR, to do that. So really my question is to Dr. Roper and General Holmes, when is the timeline to get ABMS operational? When is the combatant commander going to start getting data off this ABMS? What is the future of MTI, or the moving target that capability, the ISR capability that's in high demand? What are those timelines? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll talk to how we're going to do it, and I'll turn over to General Holmes for what the operational impact will be. So the Advanced Battle Management System is going to challenge everything about how we bring capability to bear for the warfighter. It's a stark contrast when you leave your personal life and then you go work in a military organization. You leave a personal life where you're connected to almost everything. Analytics push data to you that you don't have to request. You interact with it, allows those analytics to improve. So decision at machine speed is something we really need to fear, because if we face it on the battlefield, it's one technology that might negate the human advantage that we currently enjoy. So what we have to do in Advanced Battle Management System is build the Internet of Things, but where the things are military systems, so fighters, ships, soldiers, that are pushing data to that centralized infrastructure, but that are also getting data pushed to it. It is. If we do this as a traditional acquisition program, I'd always tell you it's already failed, right? It's too big, it touches too much. So the way we're doing it is pushing out capability in 4-month cycles. If we let it go further than that, we're not moving at internet speeds and we're injecting too much risk. So the idea is having multiple activities that have to come to bear and live fly. The first one happened in December. We connected the F-22 and the F-35 for the first time. That's great. That's not the capability we want to have a year from now, but it's a first step, and it allowed us to retire the risk, learn, and give better data to our engineers to iterate. We're going to do another activity in April, bigger, better with the way we connected the F-22 and the F-35. Rather than being something that's on the ground, we're going to fly it on an attritable drone. So we take that next evolution. The best advice we got from people that built the internet is do it in rapid iterative spirals, fail very frequently, and ensure that risk is retired and given back to engineers so that you can deliver capability in 15% slices. And the 15% slices got my attention because we typically talk about 80 or 90% solutions at the end. Their point was design it so those slices stack towards greater capability, but don't wait on delivering to the end. And so we're going to continue that through the program, sir. Sir, the biggest risk is if we don't succeed on ABMS. If we cannot bring internet-type connectivity to the military, we've already failed. We'll face adversaries who can fight at machine speed, and we won't. We have to have those things like cloud and software-defined networking and mesh ad hoc networking to move data the way the internet does. So we cannot fail on ABMS. To your question about divesting legacy assets, a lot of the things we'll need to plug in to ABMS initially will be existing systems. But we're going to have to move a lot of how we do business into the classified domain. I know a lot of members of the committee have taken us up on classified briefings. We appreciate that. We know it's hard that we can't discuss it here. But if we're going to take on a peer like China, we're going to have some tricks up our sleeves, and how we do ABMS needs to be where some of our best tricks are.
In the state of the warfighter, or do you think we're there? Or
Well,
are we going to be able to meet it?
Thank you, Congressman Bacon. You know, I'd start with, I think we already face gaps in our systems that we possess now, ability to gather the information we would need in a fight with Russia or China. They're still useful to us in what we'd call the preparation of the battlefield stage of finding information of indications and warning. But if it comes to a fight, we already have a gap in things like those older RQ-4s, the RC-135, the E-8. They're useful to us in peacetime, but we can't use them during that conflict. So we're trying to address that gap as we go forward. I think we already have more data than we can sort through to analyze and get to warfighters, and I believe that the work that our AQ is doing along with General Hyten and the rest of our service partners is going to deliver that information edge we need.
Mr. Chair, I have some follow-on questions, but I'll hope I can get a second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vella.
Dr. Jetty, the Army currently plans to upgrade over 750 UH-60s to the Victor model. Most of that work, if not all, is being done at Corpus Christi Army Depot. Can you provide the committee an update on this modernization program? Give us some insight into your thoughts on how things are going at Corpus Christi Army Depot and what you think the benefits of this entire approach are.
Sure. In summary, I'd say that things are going well. We have an 18, we had 6 Victors converted. 19 is 18 converted, 25 in 20, and we're planning to do 24 in 21. We believe we'll continue moving through the rest of the fleet out until about 34. The conversion process is going well. Corpus Christi is doing a fine job with the conversion process.
Do you see anything about Corpus Christi Army Depot to suggest the process is being impeded?
At this point, we're not competing the process. We are incorporating some commercial vendors into the process, and we're actually looking to see whether or not there's some added advantage to recompeting some of the subcomponents. Depots are very strong, very capable. They have a great deal of resources. It's good sometimes to see if we can inject some of the commercial perspective into the depot environment and facilitate a little bit more aggressive view of things.
Thank you. Secretary Roper, I was recently at Creech and saw the important work you all do with the Reapers. In the FY21 budget, the Air Force cut its MQ-9 production to 0. Why the major change in plans, and how will the Air Force address its ISR gap?
Thank you, sir. I'll speak to my side of it and then turn it over to General Nahom for the requirement side. Reaper's been a great platform for us. I mean, 4 million flight hours, just undeniable overmatch in a low-end uncontested fight, and has certainly saved many lives. But as we look to the high-end fight, we just can't take them into the battlefield. They're easily shot down. And so what we're preparing to do on the acquisition side as we take down the production line is build the next generation of system. A lot of industry have come into the drone business, right? It's a big market right now, many commercial applications. And so we'll look at a mixture of options for the future. There are things that are more high-end military unique, things that are meant to be able to survive even in a contested environment. Obviously, a lot of technology will have to go in, and they'll be likely expensive systems. But we also see a lot of opportunity to bring in commercial technology, push the price point down, have systems that can be more attritable, we can take more loss with because we can feel the quantities needed. And so we're doing studies right now looking at both ends, and I expect that's going to be one of our major decisions in the FY22 budget for the Air Force.
And sir, yeah, what Dr. Roper said is how we're balancing that measured risk with our ISR portfolio on the low end. As you notice in the budget, we're taking down the 10 lines this year, and we're working very closely with the intel community and the combatant commands for a measured reduction in the coming years that matches some of the future initiatives that we have in the ISR force, especially in the low-end fight, because we do have to balance the risk with what we're doing current day with where we need to go in the future.
So General Rudder, how will the Air Force's cuts impact the Marine Corps' development of a Reaper variant?
Well, I have to first thank General Holmes, because we've been able to enter into this world through his network and his training, and we've just had our first 2 Reaper certified Marine captains show up in Yuma with 4 sensor operators because of the Air Force training. So what we'll do is I think within our MUX system, we're going to have a family of systems, and one of those will be a land-based, long-endurance type of capability. The next generation MQ-9 could be part of that, or there could be something else out there. As Dr. Roper said, this unmanned systems enterprise, if you will, with industry is kind of wide open. There's a lot of opportunities out there. But I think the Air Force will continue to operate. We hope to be able to continue to operate with the Air Force as we've been looking at our next generation unmanned system. But I think what we've learned from the Air Force has been invaluable, so we're ready to step out on our own system.
Sir, one quick follow-up. Although right now we're talking about divesting systems, taking risk in the near term so we can modernize, one of the things we are very focused on for the next budget is not having to simply divest of current missions, but finding a way to do them cheaper. So a lot of commercial technology can help us in the low-end fight, and we need to do a better job of leveraging it. This will be one of our first challenges, to find a very different price point for continuing to operate and provide valuable ISR to the warfighter.
Well, thank you for your perspectives.
So, 2 years ago, it was all about 5th gen. A year ago, we were re-educated to say we want 4th gen and that mixture that go hand in glove. And when we look at the F-15EX, that's changed from 18 originally, now we're down to 12. It was explained to us back then that there was a certain mix going into a high-end fight that we want to have. So on one hand, we're increasing the buy for the F-35, and on this hand, we're decreasing the F-15. That mixture ratio was something that was told to us was very important, yet here we are this year looking at a different configuration. For my friends from the Air Force, can you explain how that has changed?
And sir, I'll start off that, and I'll turn over to General Holmes for more of the specifics on the fighter, but I want to get to some of the programmatics. As we balanced the President's budget this year, we definitely had to take some, we definitely had to make some tough choices in the end game. We were very cognizant not to touch the F-35 investment. We wanted to make sure we kept that steady across the fight up. On the F-15EX...
At the requested level or the unfunded level, when you say that?
I would say right now at the requested level, but we know at our requested level we kept that steady across the fight up. We wanted to make sure we had no reduction in our ability to bring on 5th generation into the Air Force. The F-15EX is very important because we have that added capacity that brings. It allows us to retire the F-15Cs and the timeline we think we need to retire them by 2026. We did reduce from 18 down to 12 in this president's budget, but we are going to keep the total number in the initial buy of the F-15EX steady across the FIDEP. And our intention is to replace the F-15Cs on time as well. You know, as we were balancing the budget at the very end, the problem is as we modernize as an Air Force, there's some things we're doing day in and day out right now with the combatant commands, and there's certain friction as we modernize that we have to make sure we're still attending to the current day fight. And that's where a lot of the balancing was at the end, to make sure we weren't retiring things too quickly, some of the older technologies, while we brought on the new technologies. And it offered some challenges as we close the books on the 21 PB. General Holmes.
Mr. Chairman, General Nahom and his team work with the Secretary and the Chief to balance the Air Force's submission and to balance a whole lot of activities and all the things that you expect the Air Force to do. From an Air Combat Command perspective, you know, we continue to believe that we need 72 fighter aircraft a year to keep up with the age of our airplanes and to keep them relevant. What you'll hear me say over and over is that I'm grateful for the additional money that we've been able to use to get readier over the last 2 or 3 years. Starting with that 18 budget, we've had increased funding, which has helped us make all our fighter force ready. And we're grateful for the additional aircraft that the committee provided last year on top of our request. But what I don't want to do is go backwards. I don't want to go back to have aircraft and crews that aren't fully ready for the fight. And so as we balance, I don't want to buy more airplanes at the expense of the weapons and the things they need to be effective, or the training environment that they need to train in that represents a Chinese or a Russian threat. I will always be arguing within the process that whatever force I have, it needs to be ready so that the aircrew members we send into harm's way are ready to do their job on behalf of the joint force. And so that's part of the trade-off that we make when we put the budget together. Thank you.
So, but the configuration, and maybe Dr. Rope, from the 15s assisting the 35s, there was a mix that you brought to us, a ratio. But here we are increasing the 35 and you're reducing the 15. So it's not a budget consideration, it's a choice that you're making because the dollar for dollar, in fact, if anything, the F-35 sustainment rate, as General Goldfein talked about, is way too high. So talk to that.
I'd take a hack at that. You know, when we made the decision several years ago, 2008 or 9, to cancel the F-22, we based that on accelerating the F-35 program. And if we had executed that program, the Air Force would have 1,000 F-35s right now, which would put us at about a 50-50 ratio of 4th and 5th gen fighters. We just delivered the 500th F-35 to all customers worldwide, not to the Air Force, and so we're behind on reaching that ratio. Right now, we have 3 F-35 squadrons that are operational in the Air Force and 5 F-22 squadrons, 10 out of 55 or so. So we're at about a 20% 5th to 4th ratio. The study that OSD Cape did and the different works have said something like a 50-50 ratio. We think maybe 60-40. So we think we're buying toward that ratio that we need in the 2,000 or so fighters that we have, and we have to keep buying F-35s to get to that ratio.
So just to follow up, as we understand, Pratt & Whitney has a protest in on the engine for the F-18. Can you bring us up to speed with that?
Sure, yes, sir. So there's a protest by Pratt & Whitney on the engine. So like we do with any protest, we will work with the GAO to resolve.
But are you preparing, if the protest is upheld, it's going to drive that timeline?
Yes, sir. So just, you know, for context, there's so when the Saudis and Qataris started modernizing the F-15, they've put over $5 billion into modernization, which we want to leverage, especially given how much it cost us to operate the F-15 Cs and Ds. So it's just a good business deal to retire the Cs and Ds, trade up to the EX. Sure. Well, part of those modernizations was integrating a new engine by GE on, so the F-110. The F-100 is on the current F-15E, and so our acquisition strategy was to be able to buy off of the line that the Qataris and the Saudis have stood up. If we have to do an engine competition, we'll add time, 2 to 3 years. And so we will work with the GAO. We will obviously follow their recommendations, but until we've had time to sit down with them, I won't have more that I can say.
Right. Just quickly, and this is for all our witnesses, coronavirus. We see what it's doing to the Italians right now. Turkey, although not the virus problem, threw some additional weight on us. What contingency plans? Because I can imagine after being down in Texas to the F-35 plant that if it hits there, it's going to have a severe effect on that production. If you could just briefly, from each of the services, how are you planning for this?
Well, sir, I'll go. I attended a meeting today with our Chief of Staff and Secretary after a meeting yesterday with the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman to talk about an overall OSD approach to it. And we've done the things you'd expect us to do. We've gone through the checklists that we have for a potential pandemic, not that we're to pandemic status, but we've planned ahead to look at how it affects us. Right now, we're concerned with the movement of our people back and forth to overseas assignments and the temporary duty that we go back and forth to do exercises. We're working through that policy. In our industry base, those are certainly challenges that are a larger challenge, I think an American challenge, a national challenge beyond our scope to be able to handle. But we're working to try to safeguard our military members and the communities where they live, and then also safeguard the readiness that we fought hard to gain through this process by thinking ahead and trying to prepare for the next steps.
Yes, sir. I think for Navy, Marine Corps, same, you know, all the services working together there. And then we're watching supply chains. Where do we have parts either being repaired or produced overseas? Do we understand supply chains? And for those foreign military sales programs where we have folks going overseas, watching that closely and controlling the movements and taking very measured response there.
Thank you. You in the same boat, no pun intended, for you Army guys.
Close to the same boat, sir. We're, although we're really trying to not do much cruise ship work together, seems that's not a good thing for coronavirus. We've surveyed all the PMs and through the PEOs to try and determine which programs are at risk in which areas. We have both some risk in the supply chain issues that we've got to take a look at, but we've also got to take a look at the delivery of systems, because I've got to move people there, deliver the systems, train people. So we're and for the Army in particular, it's people relationship issue. So we do have an extensive effort right now trying to make sure we have a good handle on that. The Army senior leaders are working very closely on trying to make sure that we've got all the things we can in place for our military families, particularly overseas. And we do have two benefits that we kind of think we contribute to the nation. One of them is a joint chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear program office, where we're working with the different health agencies within the government on transferring capabilities that we have and trying to look at biodefense and our biolabs up at Natick, or not Natick, in Maryland, to see how we can bring some of the technologies that we know there to bear on these problems. We think that within a month we'll have a fieldable local test you can quickly do and determine if someone has the effect.
Thank you, and I apologize, Ms. Hartzler, for running over.
Oh, that's right. Very important questions for sure. Dr. Jetty, to continue with you, the Army has requested to procure 36 UH-60M helicopters for fiscal year 21, and that's significantly less than 73 requested for in fiscal year 2020. And I understand that out of the 36, 13 are for the active duty, 23 are for the Army National Guard. So why is the number requested significantly lower than the number last year? And how will this impact units that are in the pipeline to receive UH-60M helicopters?
Yes, ma'am. So what we did was in our procurement last year, our specific effort is to try and retire the Alpha models. So we want to get the Alpha models out of the National Guard first, and we want to do that by 22, and then we want to get the Alpha models out of the active forces by 24. So to do that, we plussed up on our buy last year, and we're working to buy out more this year. So you're right, we put 66 of the buys last year for the M models into the National Guard, and we're planning to put 23 out of the FY21 buys into the National Guard. This is all leading to our scheme of getting the Alpha models out.
So how is this going to impact those that are in the pipeline to receive the UH-60M helicopters? Are you going to, is it going to slow down their ability to be able to receive the Mike models as you have cut the number that you're going to procure this year of the updated versions?
Well, I don't think that our view of it is that we're not trying to slow down. We were high, we were lower. For example, we were 62, 58, popped up to 74, and we're back down to 36. And what we just have is affordability of trying to keep the Mike model procurements over a period of time that's affordable. So our intent is not to stop or slow down, it's to get to a level.
So if a unit was expected and told you're going to get a Mike model, say within 2 years, then they can expect it, they'll get it.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, that's good, okay. General Rudder and Admiral Harris, the Marine Corps has identified and established a requirement for modernized aviation body armor vest for all HMLAs, airframes within the Marine Corps. In fiscal year 2020, the Marine Corps requested $2.2 million to purchase 1,000 commercial off-the-shelf units that are immediately available. However, the funds provided would not even cover half of the aviation body armor vests needed to outfit all the airframes, and there's no money requested for FY 2021. What is the Marine Corps' plan to outfit the rest of the airframes with modernized aviation body armor vests?
I think this was the initial buy from Urgent UN's request for these additional body armors, and we put that in there. We think we may have to buy some more, but we'll see what the deliveries, see if they like them when we put them with our forward elements. So if you look at the training commands and some of the squadrons that are back, they don't necessarily need outfit for every single airframe, but those that go forward will have enough to outfit those that are actually going in harm's way with these new vests, and still have some in the rear to be able to train with.
Okay. Yeah, we will watch that. Dr. Roper, during last week's Air Force posture hearing, General Goldfein highlighted the benefits and savings of the T7 program's digital design and manufacturing techniques as a game changer for bringing down sustainment and modernization costs in the long term. And I know this is your baby, your initiative that is so exciting. So are there lessons learned from the T7 program that the Air Force can apply to drive down costs on other platforms as you go forward?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the technologies that let you design and build things differently are the most exciting to me. And, I've worked with you in the past on warfighting technologies. I still love those, but we're going to have to speed up how we build things and be able to work with a broader industry base, or we can be right this year and next year in our budgets and still lose to China simply because we're not working with the entire innovation base that this country has. Digital engineering has been used in many industries that are commercial. The automotive industry has been fundamentally transformed because of it. And T7, we've seen the first crossover into military systems. I think the lesson to be learned is that when you have that level of design and your design and assembly are digitally rendered, think of it as like a simulator for designing and assembling that allows you to de-risk things before you do them in the real world. It's actually the next evolution past flying before you buy, because you can kind of digitally design and fly before you decide to do it in the physical world. So, ma'am, what it should do is it should transform how we do every acquisition. We should get rid of paper. We should transition to full digital tools. And in the Air Force, for every new program, they have to do this. So for ground-based strategic deterrent, they have to use these digital tools. And I think what we'll learn is that we can de-risk things digitally that we used to have to do in the physical world after we built the system.
I know my time is up, but I certainly hope 100% of the services are adopting the same technology.
Yes, ma'am. In shipbuilding, nuclear shipbuilding, all our submarines and aircraft carriers are 100% digital design from the start, which also goes all the way through sustainment.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions on electronic warfare. So my first is for Dr. Jetty and Mr. Gertz. I applaud the efforts made on your rotor wing aircraft and all the emphasis you put on infrared kind of countermeasures. We're seeing an increased capability that the opposition or our enemy potential adversaries will have with radar-guided missiles for helicopters, even at those lowest of altitudes. Do we have the appropriate priority for countermeasures for RF being put on our new helicopters or current ones we use?
So our current helicopters have, we've got two new programs that we're working with on the helicopters. One of them is LIMWIS, Limited Intermediate Interim Missile Warning System, that gives us an ability to detect these missiles coming in faster and then use various methods, chaff and flares, to decoy them away. We have some other things that we...
Is there a jamming pod associated?
We need to talk in a different forum.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Gertz?
Yeah, I would, again, across the board, between all of our, F-18 Gs and all of our next generation
I
pods.
was thinking though with the rotor wing.
But even on the rotary wing, we're switching over kind of our decoys and techniques there, taking advantage, again, of the rip-off and deploy R&D. So if the Air Force or the Army's done something, we will work on getting it into our fleet as quickly as possible.
Right, typically for helicopters, we've worried about IR threats. Now the RF is increasingly, that envelope's going into the rotor wing.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Even at 100 feet, right? So it's important that we have a thought or a plan for it. And for the Air Force side, I wanted to ask, or maybe it'd be better for the record and come back and talk one-on-one. I'm concerned about the EC-37 program. We have 5 aircraft out of 10 purchased to replace the EC-130s. A 6th one's in this budget. But now the Gulfstream production line's going to stop. We're talking about buying used ones that we don't know how many hours they'll have, what kind of configurations they've been in. And in the meantime, our squadron's going to have partial EC-130s, partial EC-37s. It's very hard for crew management. I'm worried about where we're going with this. Can't we not buy new aircraft, put them on hold, and then modify them later in later budgets?
So I'll speak to the acquisition, certainly open it to my colleagues for the operational impacts. But yes, we are working many options to try to accelerate how quickly we can deliver the capability. We're in discussions with vendors, and so those aren't things that I can share publicly. But yes, we understand that having a line shut down means we need to think creatively about how we can bring aircraft to bear. And sir, I'll take as an action to come by and chat with you about what we're thinking.
Anything else? I just welcome the office time if we need to do that. I think from a squadron commander, which I was a 2-time squadron commander, having a squadron with half 130s, half EC-37s, it's pretty hard to manage that crew. And it's especially, you can do it for a short time, but if we're going to do 1 aircraft a year, that is added. I just think it's a risk to that squadron and our capability if we need to deploy them.
Yes, sir. We're aware that putting that burden on the operational community is not a bill that we want to pass. And so between options to try to extend the line, used aircraft and alternative aircraft, we're pursuing options for all 3. And I can let you know which ones appear to be trending, but I need to do that in a closed setting, sir.
Thank you. One follow-up with you, Dr. Roper, if I may. Going to our ICBM wings, as you know, that we're starting to deliver the MH-139A Gray Wolf helicopters. And they have to have the capability to go to an ICBM site in case there's a force protection issue, so you have a door gunner. Typically all right in the summer, but in the winter up there, as you know, it's like -30. And what I'm hearing is it's so cold that they can't operate the guns. Do we have a plan, whether it's the right gear for, with warmers and the gloves or the mittens? It seems to me we have to have a capability for these door gunners to be effective what they're doing. Do you have any updates or any thoughts on how we can help out that community?
Yes, sir. We're working closely with Global Strike Command currently. We're aware of the weather conditions in Minot. I went up a year ago, right before winter started, and I was there on one of the warmest days on record, so I did not get to experience the full Minot experience. Part of doing UH-1 replacement, the Gray Wolf, is having capabilities that operators can use and that let them do their missions more flexibly. So cold weather, primary challenge that has to be overcome. The defenders always tell me to make sure that I say publicly when I'm testifying before you that they're some of the toughest airmen in the Air Force, and I think I agree with them. So we're working a variety of options, environmental options, clothing options to try to mitigate that risk, sir. And that's part of why we're excited to start getting those aircraft and start doing testing.
I'll just close by saying I have my ear to the ground with that community, and I know they would be pleased to hear what the plan is, because at minus 30, it is hard to operate a machine gun with an open door. Thank you.
Thank you. We have roughly 10 minutes, we expect, so you're good? So the Future Strike Fighter, the FAX. So if we go back a few years and we look at what happened when we thought we were going to up-ramp the F-35s, we let the F-18 slide down. That was a risk we managed, and that didn't come to fruition. We had to stand up the F-18 to a different number. Yet here we are getting ready to curtail 36 Super Hornets because we're expecting, the FAXX to come online. Now, we always look to history to kind of teach us in the future. What do you see differently here that historically trying to get that next generation in the original time frame hasn't been the greatest history? It gets delayed. So
Sure.
we could talk to that.
Absolutely. So in PB21, we did look at the mix of 4th and 5th gen aircraft and then started funding the next gen air dominance family of systems. The FAXX is the manned aircraft portion of that.
Right.
We believe in the way we have the program designed. It is classified. We're happy to come over and talk to you at the classified level about it. But at the unclassed level here, we're working closely with the Air Force to ensure that the systems that we put on that have the TRL that gives us confidence that we can achieve that aircraft on time in the early 30s to replace the F-18 EF as it reaches the end of its service life.
We've been there, and that's, what is it that we're not seeing this time? Because you made the same, not you, we made that determination years ago, and it didn't, so it cost you a lot more to stand up a line that was dwindling. Dr. Roper.
And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you and Ranking Member Hartzler taking that classified briefing on next generation air dominance. So we are pushing ahead on the Air Force component of the program. If you're asking why do we have hopes that things can be different, it's exactly what Ms. Hartzler referenced. It's digital engineering tools coming fully into a program, allowing us to be more agile. So I view it as a must-do. It's just as important to get the way we build the future systems right as it is to build those systems.
That's the question I wanted. Thank you. Ms. Hartzler.
Sure, my last topic here, and thank you for being so patient, covering a lot of important areas. So this is about the future vertical lift. Army, start with you, General Rugen. Last year, Congress provided you with an additional $75 million to help accelerate the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft program. Could you update us on how you're using these additional funds to accelerate the program?
Yes, ma'am. And really, we're leveraging fully the Joint Multi-Role Tech Demonstrator. We have 2 demonstrators flying now, and we're taking that demonstrator program into a phase where we're looking at the weapon system. So that's a higher bar, and honestly, it's driving down the risk of those, making it more of a weapon system. It also set the conditions for a 4-year acceleration on the program from 2034, first unit equipped, to 2030. And then it's also informing our trades analysis on our requirements, so getting requirements that are achievable.
If I could just add.
Sure.
So this is one of the things that sometimes isn't understood, so I'll just make sure it's clear. When we did the joint, the JMRTD, you get an aircraft that has the fundamental capability to fly, to demonstrate some of the major components of the system, but this issue of it not being a weapon system, for example, it doesn't have, these were never designed to be able to withstand rough landings. They weren't designed to have the data buses that we need for combat operations in them. All of these things have to be built out for the aircraft. You can either wait until you get through a very formal development program, or you can begin funding some of those efforts. It's the application of those funds to those type of efforts which are actually allowing us to accelerate, because now what we know is we're going to begin transitioning this from simply a demonstrator to a weapons system. And we're
Makes
pursuing
sense.
it on both platforms.
Makes sense. General Rudder, how's the Marine Corps participating in the Future Vertical Lift Initiative, and have you requested funding in fiscal year 2021 budget request for this effort?
Yes, our FVL replacement, Cape Set 3, we're tied in with the Army. We have actually an officer down in Huntsville participating with all their meetings. So the Army's going a lot faster. And our replacement for the H1 doesn't really come into play till about 2035. But we are tracking everything that the Army's doing and watching that. We're also using the limited funds that we put in there. I think you added some funds for us last year. We put about $10 million in for 21, just to look at operating concepts, mission survivability, and really digital operability. Much like we're doing with our unmanned systems, we want to make sure that we've got, within the industry model, we've got the digital operability right. But we are tied in with the Army in tracking this very closely as they down select to their next 2 air vehicles.
Good, and it looks like you want to say something, and I was going to go back to you anyway, just on the last question regarding the affordability of this platform. There have been 2 studies over the last year analyzing the future vertical lift affordability. So can you walk us through the results of the studies? Explain to us what measures the Army is taking to ensure affordability for both the future vertical lift as well as the future attack reconnaissance aircraft.
Yes, ma'am. Those 2 studies, one from the Congressional Budget Office and then one from CSIS, really analyzed our past 20 years of historical procurement dollars. And what came out was, with 2 aircraft going forward, we trended towards, from 2019 to 2050, on the procurement of our new aircraft, the lower end of those budgets. So a lean program, a lower end of those budgets, and not a higher end. So we also were cautioned by those 2 reports to maintain, vigilance over our operations and sustainment costs, and we're doing that now. So we have 5 pillars of cost, in our cost-conscious culture. Requirements, we're picking it and sticking it. We're not going to have the requirements creep you've maybe seen from past aviation programs. We also have competition. There's robust competition from industry to win these aircraft. IP and data rights strategy, we're part of a Pathfinder program with Dr. Jetty on what is going to be our IP and data rights strategy. We've also gone to school with external experts on past programs that maybe had cost overruns. And then the O&S cost and technology that, I echo Dr. Roper. We are in the digital design environment, and that is going to impact in a positive way our ops and sustainment costs.
It's encouraging. Hopefully it can be an example for other.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming, all 8 of you, and certainly our staff for prepping us for all 8. Just a quick reminder, our ISR is April 1st. Mr. Bacon, I know, particularly so we can do the ABMS and some more questions along that line. With that, we are adjourned.